I gave birth to my daughter on a Tuesday in October. The labor took 14 hours. When they finally put her in my arms, the first thing I noticed was her hair. It was dark brown, almost black. Mine is blonde. My boyfriend Jake's is light brown. My mom was in the room. So was my sister Rebecca. Jake had stepped out to make phone calls. My mom looked at the baby and said she was beautiful. Rebecca took about 50 photos. Neither of them mentioned the hair. Jake came back 20 minutes later. He looked at the baby for maybe 5 seconds and then left again. Said he needed air. My mom told me not to worry, that new fathers get overwhelmed. But Jake and I had been together for years. We planned this pregnancy. He'd been excited right up until about 2 weeks before my due date. Then something changed. He started staying late at work. He stopped asking about baby names. When I tried to talk to him about it, he'd say everything was fine and change the subject. I thought maybe he was just scared. First minus time parent nerves. I let it go. In the hospital, my mom and Rebecca were acting weird too. They kept whispering to each other. My mom was on her phone constantly, texting someone. She said she was just updating family members. But she had this look on her face I'd never seen before. Tight. Jake came back into the room an hour later. He sat in the chair farthest from the bed and stared at the floor. I asked him if he wanted to hold the baby. He said maybe later. My mom immediately jumped in and said he was probably just tired, that we were all tired, that we should let him process in his own way. That should have been my first red flag. My mom making excuses for Jake. She'd never liked him that much before. The nurses kept coming in with paperwork, birth certificate information, insurance forms, medical history documents. Every time they brought something, my mom would intercept it. She'd read through it first, then hand it to me and point to where I needed to sign. She did this so smoothly I didn't even question it at the time. One nurse brought in a form about paternity acknowledgement. It was a legal document establishing Jake as the father. Jake would need to sign it too. The nurse explained that if we weren't married, this form was necessary to put his name on the birth certificate. My mom took the form before I could even look at it properly. She thanked the nurse and said we'd handle it. After the nurse left, my mom folded the form and put it in her purse. She said she'd make sure Jake signed it later, when he was feeling better. She said there was no rush, that we had time to deal with paperwork. I was too exhausted to argue. I just pushed a human being out of my body. My brain was mush. We went home 3 days later. Jake stayed at my apartment, but he barely interacted with the baby. He'd feed her if I asked him to. He'd change her diaper. But he never picked her up on his own, never looked at her for more than a few seconds at a time. My mom and Rebecca were at my place every single day, sometimes twice a day, bringing food, doing laundry, holding the baby. They were being helpful, but it felt wrong, too attentive, too involved. My mom kept asking me questions about the birth certificate. Had I filled it out yet? Had I listed Jake as the father? What was taking so long? I told her I was waiting until we got the official paperwork from the hospital. She got this panicked look for just a second, then covered it with a smile. She said I should just fill it out and list Jake. That's what you do. Rebecca was acting strange in a different way. She kept staring at the baby, not in a normal aunt way, almost guilty way. She'd hold her and whisper things I couldn't quite hear. When I asked her what she was saying, she'd smile and say she was just talking baby talk. But it wasn't baby talk. The tone was wrong. 1 week after we got home, Jake stopped coming over as much. He'd show up for an hour, hold the baby for 10 minutes, then say he had to go. Work meetings, friends he'd promised to see, errands he needed to run. Always an excuse. I asked him what was happening with us. He said nothing was happening. I asked him if he still wanted to be with me. He said of course he did. But his eyes wouldn't meet mine when he said it. My mom was there for that conversation. She'd been in the kitchen making lunch. She came out and interrupted us. Told Jake he should go if he had things to do. Told me I shouldn't stress him out. Told me that new parents need space to adjust. I watched her usher him out of my apartment. Watched her pat his shoulder and say something to him I couldn't hear. He nodded and left. That was a Thursday. On Friday, Jake texted me that he needed to talk. He came over that evening. My mom and Rebecca weren't there for once. It was just us and the baby, who was asleep in her bassinet. He sat me down on the couch. He was shaking. His face was pale. He looked like he might throw up. He told me he couldn't do this anymore. Said he wasn't ready to be a father. Said he'd made a mistake. He was crying the whole time, which made it worse somehow. He kept saying he was sorry over and over, but he wouldn't look at me. I asked him if there was someone else. He said no. I asked him if it was about the baby. He said it was complicated. I asked him what the hell that meant. He just shook his head. He said he'd support the baby financially if that's what I needed. He'd sign whatever papers I wanted him to sign. But he couldn't be in a relationship with me anymore. He couldn't be a present father. He was too young, too unprepared, too overwhelmed. I asked him why he'd changed his mind so suddenly. 2 weeks before the birth, he'd been talking about proposing. He'd been looking at engagement rings online. He'd shown me the websites. We'd talked about getting a bigger place together. About getting married before the baby turned 1. He didn't answer. He just stood up and left. I sat on that couch in shock. The baby started crying. I picked her up and fed her and changed her diaper. I did everything on autopilot. My brain couldn't process what had just happened. My mom showed up 30 minutes later. I don't know how she knew. I hadn't called her. But there she was, letting herself in with the spare key I'd given her for emergencies. She hugged me and said everything would be okay. Said Jake was clearly not mature enough to handle fatherhood. Said I was better off without him. She said these things while taking the baby from my arms, while settling into my rocking chair like she lived there. Then she said something that stuck with me. She said, "You don't need him anyway. We'll take care of you. You and the baby both. We're family." The way she said "we'll take care of you" made my skin crawl. It sounded less like comfort and more like a statement of ownership. Rebecca came over an hour later. She brought wine and Chinese food. They both stayed until almost midnight. They took turns holding the baby. They told me I'd be fine. That single mothers do it all the time. That I was strong enough to handle this. My mom kept circling back to the birth certificate. Said I needed to make a decision. Said I could list Jake even though he'd left, or I could leave the father line blank, or I could list father unknown. I told her I didn't know what to do, that I needed to think about it. She said I should probably just leave it blank. Start fresh. The baby didn't need a father on paper who wasn't going to be present in her life anyway. I asked her why she cared so much about the birth certificate. She got flustered. Said she was just trying to help me think through my options. Said it was a big decision. Said I should consider what was best for the baby. That weekend, my mom brought over a man I'd never met before. His name was David Cho. He was a lawyer. He specialized in family law. My mom said she'd called in a favor, that David was going to help me navigate the legal side of being a single parent. Help me figure out custody and child support and all of that. I asked her how much this was costing. She waved me off. Said David owed her a favor from some work she'd done for him. Said he was doing this for free. David sat at my kitchen table and went through everything. He had a nice leather briefcase, expensive pen. He took notes in a legal pad while asking me questions about Jake. How much money he made. Whether we'd been living together. Whether we'd talked about marriage. I answered everything honestly because I didn't know what else to do. Then David asked if I was absolutely certain Jake was the father. The question came out of nowhere. I stared at him. Of course I was certain. Jake was the only person I'd been with in over a year. I told him that. David nodded slowly. He looked at my mom. My mom looked at Rebecca. There was something in that exchange. Something rehearsed. Then David said that sometimes, in situations like this, it was a good idea to get a paternity test. Just to be sure. Just to have documentation. It would make the custody and support process smoother. It would prevent Jake from contesting anything later. It was just smart legal strategy. I didn't see any reason to argue. Fine. Whatever. I just wanted it all handled so I could focus on taking care of my daughter. David said he'd arrange everything. He'd bring the test kit to my apartment. He'd handle the lab work. He'd get the results back to me. All I had to do was let him swab the baby's cheek. He came back 3 days later with the kit. My mom was there, so was Rebecca. They'd been showing up together a lot lately. Always at the same time. Always staying for hours. David swabbed the baby's cheek right there in my living room. He put the swab in a sealed tube. Put the tube in a prepaid envelope. Said the results would take about a week. My mom watched the whole process intensely. When David sealed the envelope, she visibly relaxed. After David left, I asked my mom why she was so interested in the paternity test. She said she just wanted to make sure everything was handled correctly. That I had legal protection. That no one could come after me later claiming I lied about paternity or trapped someone into fatherhood. It sounded reasonable, but something about it felt off. The results came back 8 days later. David brought them to my apartment in a sealed envelope. My mom and Rebecca were both there. Again, I was starting to feel suffocated by their constant presence. I loved them, but I needed space. I tried telling them that. They acted hurt and said they were just trying to help. I opened the envelope. Read the paper inside. The test showed that Jake was not the biological father of my daughter. I read it 3 times. The words didn't make sense. There had to be a mistake. The lab had mixed up samples. Something had gone wrong. David was saying something about how these things happen sometimes. How memory can be tricky. How maybe there had been someone else I'd forgotten about. A drunken night. A lapse in judgment. It happened to the best of people. My mom was rubbing my back. Telling me it was okay. That we'd figure it out. That the important thing was the baby was healthy and I was capable of taking care of her. Rebecca was just staring at me with this expression I couldn't read. I told them to leave. All of them. I needed to process this alone. My mom said she didn't want to leave me by myself. I told her I'd be fine. I needed space. She hesitated for a long time. Then she kissed my forehead and left with Rebecca. David left his business card on the counter. Said to call him when I was ready to discuss next steps. Said we'd need to figure out who the father actually was if I wanted to pursue child support. I sat on my couch for hours with that paper in my hands. Trying to remember. Trying to figure out how this was possible. Jake and I had been exclusive for 4 years. I'd never cheated. I'd never even been tempted. I went through the timeline in my head. The baby had been conceived in late January. I was absolutely certain about that because I tracked my cycles. Jake and I had been together the entire month of January. We'd spent New Year's together. We'd gone on a weekend trip to the mountains mid-month. We'd been inseparable. Except, there was one weekend in late January where Jake had gone to visit his family in another state. His grandmother had been sick. He'd been gone from Friday morning to Sunday night. That weekend, Rebecca had invited me to her birthday party. It was on Saturday night at a bar downtown. She turned 20-8. She'd invited a bunch of her friends from work in her social circle. People I didn't really know. I'd gone because Rebecca had begged me to. She said she wanted her sister there. That it would mean a lot to her. The party was at this upscale bar in the financial district. Everyone there had money. Designer clothes. Expensive watches. They talked about their vacation homes and their investment portfolios. I'd felt completely out of place in my Target dress and drugstore makeup. Rebecca had introduced me to a bunch of people whose names I immediately forgot. At some point, one of her friends had started talking to me. His name was Christopher. He was older than everyone else there, maybe late 30s. Good minus looking in that polished, expensive way. Perfect hair, perfect teeth. Suit that probably cost more than my rent. He'd been charming. Asked me questions about myself. Actually seemed interested in my answers. Bought me drinks. I'd been flattered by the attention. Jake had been distant leading up to his trip. We'd been arguing about small things. Money. Stupid couple stuff. It had felt nice to have someone focus on me. I remembered talking to Christopher for a long time. I remembered laughing. I remembered him buying me another drink. And another. I remembered feeling dizzy. The room spinning. Then nothing. The next thing I remembered was waking up in my own bed on Sunday morning. I was still in my dress. My head was pounding. I had bruises on my arms I couldn't explain. I felt wrong. Sick. Violated in a way I couldn't articulate. I'd called Rebecca immediately. Asked her what had happened. How I'd gotten home. She'd laughed. Said I'd gotten way too drunk. Said Christopher had offered to drive me home because I couldn't even stand up straight. She said he was a good guy. That he'd made sure I got home safe. That I'd probably just blacked out from drinking too much. I'd never blacked out before. I'd been drunk plenty of times in college and after. I knew what being drunk felt like. This had felt different, but I'd let it go. I was embarrassed. I figured I'd just overdone it. Jake came back that Sunday night and I never even mentioned the party to him. I hadn't thought about that night in months. Now I couldn't stop thinking about it. I called Rebecca. It was almost midnight, but I didn't care. She answered on the fourth ring. I asked her for Christopher's full name. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked why I wanted to know. I said I just needed it. She asked if I'd gotten the paternity test results back. My blood went cold. How did she know David had brought the results today? I hadn't told her. I asked her how she knew. She stumbled over her words. Said she just assumed. That David had said it would be about a week. She'd just been guessing. I didn't believe her. I asked her again for Christopher's full name. She said she didn't remember his last name. That he was just some guy she knew from work events. That she didn't really know him that well. I told her she was lying. I could hear it in her voice. She said I was being paranoid. That I should get some sleep. That we'd talk tomorrow when I was thinking more clearly. I told her I was thinking perfectly clearly. I asked her what the hell had happened that night at her birthday party. She said nothing happened. I got drunk. Christopher drove me home. That's it. I asked her if anything else had happened. She said no. Why was I asking this? What was I trying to imply? I hung up on her. I called my mom. She didn't answer. I called 3 more times. Straight to voicemail. I didn't sleep at all that night. I fed the baby, changed her, rocked her, and thought about everything. Every conversation I'd had with my mom and Rebecca over the past 10 months. Every time they'd acted strangely. Every time they'd pushed me away from asking questions. By morning, I knew. I didn't have proof yet. But I knew. I drove to Rebecca's apartment at 7 a.m. She answered the door in her pajamas. She looked like she hadn't slept either. I pushed past her into her apartment, asked her where my mom was. Rebecca said she didn't know. I said I didn't believe her. I said I knew they were lying to me about something and I wanted the truth. Rebecca started crying. She sat down on her couch and put her face in her hands. She said she couldn't do this anymore. That it was too much. That she'd told Mom it was wrong from the beginning, but Mom had insisted. I asked her what was wrong. What had they done? She said she couldn't tell me. That she'd promised. That there would be consequences if she said anything. I told her I didn't care about her promises. I cared about the truth. I cared about my daughter. I needed to know who her father was. Rebecca looked up at me. Her face was blotchy from crying. She said Christopher's last name was Haverford. He was a real estate developer. He owned half the new condos going up downtown. He was very wealthy. He was also married with 3 kids. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I asked Rebecca what had happened that night at her party. She said she didn't know all the details. That Christopher had taken me home. That what happened after that was between me and him. But she'd suspected. She'd had her suspicions about what he might have done. I asked her why she hadn't said anything. Why she hadn't warned me. Why she'd let me think I'd just gotten drunk. She said she hadn't been sure. And even if she had been sure, what was she supposed to do? Accuse one of the wealthiest men in the city of assault based on a suspicion? Ruin his life over something she couldn't prove? I wanted to hit her. I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked her if my mom knew. Rebecca nodded. She said Mom had figured it out early in my pregnancy. When I'd mentioned feeling sick and doing the math on when I'd conceived. Mom had remembered the date of Rebecca's party. She'd put it together. I asked if Christopher knew. Rebecca said yes. Mom had called him, confronted him. He'd admitted that something had happened that night, but he'd claimed I'd been into it. That I'd wanted it. That it was consensual even if I'd been too drunk to remember. My mom had threatened to go to the police, to tell his wife, and he'd offered her money, a lot of money, enough money to make the problem go away, to keep everything quiet, to make sure I never found out the truth. My mom had taken the deal. I asked Rebecca how much. She said she didn't know the exact amount, but she knew Mom had paid off her house, knew there had been enough left over for other things, knew that David the lawyer had been paid too, and Jake had been paid to break up with me and disappear. I asked Rebecca if she'd been paid. She started crying harder. She said yes. She said she'd needed the money. Her student loans were drowning her. She was barely making rent. When Mom had offered her a cut, she'd taken it. She'd hated herself for it ever since, but she'd taken it. I left her apartment without another word. I drove to my mom's house. Let myself in with the key I still had. She was in the kitchen making coffee. She saw me and immediately knew. I could see it in her face. The fear. I asked her if it was true. She said she could explain. I told her to start explaining. She said she'd done it for me. For the baby. Christopher would never acknowledge my daughter. He'd never be a father to her. His wife would destroy him if she found out about the affair. It was better this way, cleaner. The money would help me raise my daughter without struggling. I wouldn't have to work 3 jobs. I asked her how much he'd paid her. She said it didn't matter. I said it mattered to me. She said $70 minus $5,000. I asked her what she'd done with it. She said she'd paid off her mortgage, put some in savings, given some to Rebecca, paid David, paid Jake, set up a trust fund for the baby that I'd have access to eventually. I asked her if she understood what she'd done, that she'd helped cover up what was essentially assault, that she'd taken money to hide the identity of my daughter's father, that she'd manipulated me into thinking I was crazy or forgetful or a cheater. She said she'd protected me. She'd protected my daughter. She'd made sure we'd be taken care of. I asked her if she had any of the money left. She said some. I told her she was going to need it for a lawyer. Then I left. I went home and called every lawyer in the phone book until I found one who specialized in paternity cases. Her name was Patricia Chen. She agreed to meet with me that afternoon. I brought everything I had. The DNA test results from David, the dates, Rebecca's birthday party, Christopher's name, everything my mom and sister had told me. Patricia listened to everything. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she asked if I wanted revenge or if I wanted justice. I asked what the difference was. She said revenge was messy and emotional. Justice was cold and legal and usually more effective. I told her I wanted both. She smiled. She said we'd need to get a real DNA test first, one that Christopher couldn't dispute, one that would hold up in court. She had contacts at an accredited lab. She'd arrange everything. She also said we needed to get proof of the conspiracy. Emails, text messages, the contract if there was one, bank records showing the payments. Anything that proved my mom and Rebecca and David and Jake had been paid to hide the truth. I told her my mom had left her laptop at my place a few days earlier. She'd been using it to look up baby stuff. She hadn't picked it up yet. Patricia's eyes lit up. She said if I gave her permission, she could have someone look at it. Someone who knew what they were looking for. I gave her permission. 2 days later, Patricia called me. She said her tech guy had found everything. Months of emails between my mom and Christopher. Wire transfer confirmations. A signed contract between Christopher, my mom, Rebecca, David, and Jake. The contract laid out everything. Christopher would pay my mom $70,000 minus $5,000. Rebecca $30,000. David $20,000. He'd also set up a trust fund for the baby with $200,000 that I couldn't touch until she turned 18. In exchange, they'd all ensure I never found out Christopher was the father. My mom would arrange the paternity test through David. David would falsify the results. Jake would agree to be listed as the father initially, then break up with me and leave quietly. Rebecca would help keep me distracted and confused. They'd all stick to the story that I'd been too drunk to remember what happened that night. If I ever did figure it out, they'd deny everything and claim I was an unstable single mother trying to extort a wealthy man. The contract even had a clause about discrediting me if necessary. They'd claim I was mentally unwell, that I had a history of making false accusations, that I was trying to trap Christopher for money. Reading that contract was the moment I stopped feeling sad and started feeling cold. Patricia filed a paternity suit against Christopher Haverford the next day. Not quietly. Not through a private attorney. She filed it in county court where all the records are public. She attached every piece of evidence we had. The emails. The wire transfers. She also filed a complaint against David Cho with the State Bar Association for falsifying legal documents, participating in fraud, and violating attorney-client privilege. Then we went after Christopher directly. Patricia contacted his wife. Her name was Elizabeth Haverford. She came from old money. Her family owned half the commercial real estate in the downtown core. She was on the board of 3 hospitals and 2 museums. Patricia sent her a package. Inside was a copy of the DNA test, the contract, the emails between Christopher and my mom, proof that Christopher had paid off my family to cover up his illegitimate child. Elizabeth opened the package at her office. She called Patricia within an hour. She wanted to meet me. We met at her lawyer's office downtown. Elizabeth was exactly what I'd expected. Mid-40s. Elegant. She looked at me like I was an interesting problem to solve. She asked me what I wanted. I told her I wanted Christopher to acknowledge his daughter. I wanted child support. I wanted him to face consequences for what he'd done. She asked if I was after her money. I told her no. I was after his. She smiled. She said we could work together. She was filing for divorce. She wanted to destroy him financially and socially. My lawsuit would help with that. In exchange, she'd make sure I got everything I was entitled to. Child support, damages, medical expenses, everything. She also told me something I didn't know. Christopher had done this before. Not the secret child part, but the assault part. She'd found out years ago, but he'd convinced her it was lies. Bitter women trying to extort him. She'd believed him because she'd wanted to. Now she knew better, and she was going to make him pay for every lie he'd ever told her. The lawsuit became public record 3 days later. Local news picked it up because Christopher was semi-prominent in real estate. The story was juicy. Wealthy married developer drugs and assaults woman at party, gets her pregnant, pays off her family to hide the truth. His phone started ringing. Reporters, business partners, clients. Everyone wanted a statement. He denied everything. Said I was a scorned woman trying to ruin him. Then Elizabeth filed for divorce. Very publicly. Very loudly. She held a press conference. She showed up in her lawyer's office with her own stack of evidence. Other women Christopher had paid off. Other settlements. Other secrets. The story exploded. Christopher's business partners started distancing themselves immediately. 3 major development deals fell through in the first week. Investors pulled out. His company started hemorrhaging money. His reputation was destroyed overnight. Country club membership revoked. Kicked off to charity boards. His name became poison in business circles. Then the IRS got involved. Turns out Christopher had been writing off the payments to my family as business expenses. He'd claimed they were consulting fees. My mom, who did his taxes, had signed off on it. Patricia made sure the IRS knew about it. She sent them everything, the contract, the bank records, proof that the payments were actually hush money, not legitimate business expenses. The IRS opened an investigation. They went after Christopher for tax fraud. They also went after my mom because she'd prepared the false tax returns. My mom's accounting license was suspended pending investigation. She lost her job. The IRS came after her for the $70,000-5,000 she'd received. They wanted it back, plus penalties, plus interest. She couldn't pay it. She'd already spent most of it on her mortgage. The IRS put a lien on her house, froze her bank accounts. She called me crying, begging me to drop the lawsuit, said she was going to lose everything. I told her she should have thought about that before she sold me out for $70,000-5,000. Rebecca got hit too. The $30,000 she'd received was considered taxable income she'd never reported. The IRS wanted their cut, plus penalties for failure to report. She didn't have the money. She'd spent it paying off student loans. She had to file for bankruptcy. Lost her car. Had to move back in with our mom. She called me once. Said I was destroying the family over something that wasn't even that big of a deal. That Christopher hadn't really hurt me. That I'd clearly been fine. That I was being vindictive and cruel. I hung up on her. Blocked her number. Jake tried to disappear. He'd taken his $50,000 and moved to Arizona. Got a new job. New apartment. Tried to start over. Patricia racked him down in 3 days. She filed a fraud claim against him. The court ordered him to return the money. He claimed he didn't have it anymore. He'd spent it paying off credit card debt and eyeing a used car. The court didn't care. They garnished his wages. Put a lien on his car. He called me from a blocked number. Said I was ruining his life over nothing. That he'd just taken money to get out of a relationship that wasn't working anyway. That he hadn't actually done anything wrong. I told him he'd taken money to lie on legal documents and help cover up what had happened to me. Then I hung up. David was disbarred. The state bar investigation moved quickly once they saw the evidence. He'd violated multiple ethics rules, falsified legal documents, engaged in conspiracy to defraud a client, misrepresented himself and his services. He lost his license to practice law. He also had to pay me damages for the fraud. The bar ordered him to pay $50,000. He tried to appeal, had to liquidate his retirement accounts to pay me. I put every dollar into a college fund for my daughter. Christopher lost everything. Elizabeth took him apart in the divorce. She got the house. Full custody of their 3 kids with supervised visitation only. She got half his business assets. She got alimony. She got everything she asked for because she had the evidence of his affairs, his payoffs, his lies. His business collapsed. Too many deals fell through. Too many investors pulled out. Too many clients walked away. He had to file for bankruptcy. He lost his office building. Lost his cars. Lost his reputation completely. The IRS case against him took 18 months to resolve. He ended up owing over $2 million in back taxes, penalties, and interest. He sold everything he had left and still couldn't pay it all. Last I heard, he's working as a property manager for someone else's company, making about $40,000–5,000 a year, living in a studio apartment, driving a 10-year-old Honda. He also has to pay child support for my daughter. The court ordered him to pay $1,200 a month based on his previous income. He tried to get it reduced based on his current income. The judge denied the request. Said he could get a second job. Christopher tried to get visitation rights. Filed paperwork requesting shared custody. Claimed he wanted to be part of his daughter's life. I fought him with everything I had. Patricia presented evidence of the assault. The cover minus up, the payments, everything. She argued that a man who drugged and assaulted the mother of his child, then paid off her family to hide the truth, had forfeited any right to be a father. The judge agreed. Denied all visitation. Said Christopher had given up any parental rights when he'd chosen to hide his daughter's existence. Said he was lucky he wasn't facing criminal charges. I thought that was the end of it. But Christopher tried again. And again. He's filed for visitation 3 times now. Lost every time. He's spending money he doesn't have on lawyers who can't win an unwinnable case. Patricia says he's trying to reduce the child support by proving he's trying to be involved. If he can show the court he wants to be a father but I'm preventing it, maybe he can argue for lower payments. It won't work. We have too much evidence. But he keeps trying. The criminal case took longer to develop. Patricia connected me with a detective who specialized in sexual assault cases. I told him everything. He investigated. The problem was time. It had been over a year since the assault. No physical evidence. No rape kit. No witnesses. Just my word against Christopher's. But the detective found other women. 3 of them. Women Christopher had assaulted in similar ways. Drugged at parties or bars. Woken up with gaps in their memory. Too scared or ashamed to report it. Elizabeth's divorce had made them brave. They came forward, filed their own reports. The district attorney reviewed everything, decided there was enough for charges. Christopher was arrested at his property management office, charged with multiple counts of sexual assault, administering drugs without consent, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. He posted bail, hired an expensive lawyer he couldn't afford, tried to fight it. The trial is set for next month. Patricia says we have a strong case. The other women. The pattern of behavior. The contract proving he knew he'd done something wrong and tried to hide it. I'll have to testify. Tell a courtroom full of strangers what happened that night. What I remember and what I don't. How I woke up feeling violated. How my family betrayed me. I'm not looking forward to it. But I'll do it. My daughter is 2 years old now. She's perfect. Smart. Funny. Happy. She doesn't know any of these people. She doesn't know about Christopher or what he did. She doesn't know about the conspiracy or the betrayal or any of it. She knows me. She knows I love her. That's enough for now. Financially, we're secure. Between the child support, the damages from David, the settlement from Elizabeth, and the trust fund Patricia helped me get control of, I have enough. I don't work 3 jobs. I work 1 job I actually like. I can afford a good daycare, a safe apartment, health care, everything my daughter needs. My mom lost her house. The IRS eased it to cover what she owed. She's living in a small apartment now. Working retail because no one will hire her as an accountant anymore. She tried to reach out a few months ago. Sent me a letter saying she was sorry, that she'd made a mistake, that she hoped I could forgive her someday. I threw the letter away. Rebecca is living with our mom. Still hasn't recovered financially from the bankruptcy. She works 2 jobs. Barely makes rent on half of the tiny apartment. She sends me mails sometimes, saying she's sorry.